Good evening, everyone. We ended yesterday at verse 15, and it was a time when the army of horses and a team of chariots from the king of Aram was encircling the city. And the servant of Elisha was very afraid. And basically he was at a loss, and so these were the words that is translated: "This is hopeless, my master. What are we to do?" It is an expression of hopelessness, an expression of not knowing what to do, because it is in a state where there is nothing one can do to defend oneself from the king of Aram. Now we continue in verse 16. And he said, and this is Elisha. This would be, and then Elisha said. Elisha then tells him these words: "Do not fear, for those who are together with us are greater than those who are with them." Now, there is a sense that we need to think about. Those who are with us are greater than those who are with them. Now, those who are with them, we already know. They are an army of horses and a team of chariot encircling the city. And those who are with us is somebody that the servant doesn't know. Now, this word greater, by greater, you can think of in terms of number. There are more numerous, or in terms of ability or power, it'll be more powerful. And so this word greater really carries a broader understanding that Elisha is not afraid of the army of the king of Aram, nor the chariot or the team of chariots, because he sees and he knows that there are more supporting him and more powerful. However, I think one of the things that we need to understand is fear. This is fear. Fear is when one is not aware of how things will turn out. So that would be fear. Fearful of a consequence because you don't know what to do. And I think this would be a sense of being terrified, at least within the context. Fear God is also about not knowing how God will punish you. And so one ought to fear God. And so in this case, it says, "Do not be afraid or do not fear King of Aram, the army of horses and a team of chariots." Why? Because there are those who are more in number and greater in power. And so we read in verse 17, and then Elisha prayed and said, now this is one of the rare occasions. The rare occasions in praying, and this would be interceding on behalf, asking for something. And it says this: "Lord, please open the eyes. Please open his eyes so that he may see." Now, these are very important words. It is God who can open, and it's the eyes so that he can see. Now, all of these are key words. God has the power to do that. Now, what does that mean? It means that whatever he is seeing now, he is not seeing. So, technically, you would say that the servant is blind. He is blind because he can't see the reality that is around him. And it is in a dimension that only God himself can enable. So I'm just trying to suggest to us that there is another dimension that only God can allow. Now, can allow to see, I guess. So, in order for the servant to be able to see, the Hebrew words use these words: open eyes. It's not that his eyes are not open, but his eyes are considered blind in the sense that he is not seeing what there is because that dimension is hidden from him. So I guess the idea of hidden is a better word than a typical modern day idea of blind. The modern day idea of blind is that the sight is completely devoid, meaning you can't see a thing. But in this way, his eyes are open, but he can't see, meaning he can't see past the current dimension. And God is being asked by Elisha to open his eyes wider, bigger, or enabling the eye to see this new dimension. So I use the word dimension. And so what we can tell now is that after the prayer, we have the and then here. The interceding was agreed by God. Jehovah opened the servant's eyes, and then he saw. So these are the steps that happen. First, the eyes must be open, and then only he can see this new dimension, which means that in our current dimension of the world, uh, different dimensions can exist. Now, I use the word dimension, a more technical term, so that we can understand that while our eyes today are open to see our dimension, then it is only up to God to open one's eyes so that one can see another dimension that's overlapping with ours. And what he did see is this. It says, and behold, and look, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. And so, what really did happen is that now he can see what others cannot see, an equivalent army of horses and a team of chariots. But in this case, of fire. Ish. Fire is a description of power, I would say. And that whatever the fire is engaged in, it will eat up everything in its way. And so, whenever you talk about the horses and chariot of fire, you find that in an imagery, fire is engulfing as a picture in the mind, but the imagery is supposed to convey that these horses and chariots of a different dimension is far more powerful, just like fire. And it's all around Elisha. And Elisha seems to be able to see. Elisha sees it, and so he is not afraid. The servant can't see, and so he is afraid. So fear is about the unknown, not knowing what God will do with you if you misstep and go against God. So one ought to fear God and make sure every step is right with God. Here, Elisha is not afraid of the king of Aram because God has sent the people, I would say people of the other dimension. This would be the angels. And in this case, you see that it is shown in an imagery that the servant can understand, that he can see that while there is the king of Aram's men and chariot, there is also the horses. And in this case, you find that it does not talk about who is on the horses. Please bear in mind that in the Bible and in ancient days, horses are animals or beasts of war. And so there will be armies that seated on. And so oftentimes we are talking about Jehovah Tsevaot. And this talks about the legions or the army of God. And these are the angels who will fight for God. And so full of horses will have angels on board, and they are defending Elisha. And so Elisha is never afraid. What we can tell is the man of God, in constant touch with God, has been enabled first to hear what King of Aram would be saying in his secret places. And so he can warn the king of Israel. And now that he is surrounded by the king of Aram, horses and chariot, he can also see what God has sent to protect him. And obviously they are far more powerful. And so hence the word greater. Verse 18. And then it was a time when the king of Aram's horses and chariot is ready to attack the city of Dothan. When they came down to him, Elisha again prayed to Jehovah. Now, this idea of praying is interceding, pleading. I think we can use the word pleading, and it's pleading to God because this is not the normal thing that would happen. And he says these, and then said, please strike this people with blindness. And then Jehovah struck them with blindness in accordance with the word of Elisha. And so these words, please strike this people with blindness, is the word of Elisha. And here God concedes to what Elisha has asked. So one lesson we can learn is a man of Elohim is in constant touch with his God. And they are in partnership. And the man of God is the servant. And the servant can always ask. And so in this case, it is with blindness. Now, again, now we talk about blindness. We have a dimension. And just now we saw that not able to see is blindness. When the servant of Elisha cannot see the divine angelic horses and chariot of fire, that was a different dimension. He was blind to that. And then when his eyes were open, so we said that God enabled him to see that particular dimension, then he could see all the angels around. Now, in this case, the people were already in the current dimension. And so blindness in this case is to confuse, is to cause a disability. That whatever they see, they do not understand. Now, this is also called blindness. Right? This is called blindness. So that when they come into Elisha, they would not recognize Elisha. We have in verse 19, and then Elisha said to them, this is not the way, nor is this the city. This is not where you want to go. Now, why would they listen to Elisha? Because they are confused. They are not able to understand what they are seeing. That is what it means by blindness. It's not that they can't see anymore. So Elisha says, follow me and I will bring you to the man whom you seek. And then he brought them to Samaria. Now, the idea of Samaria is quite clear. He brought them to where the king is. Now, first of all, I would like to address this issue here. He says, follow me and I will bring you to the man you seek. Now, in modern day, we would say that this is a lie. This is not a lie. This is called a misdirection. And this is in a time to save a life. And this is to save a life that's valuable to God. And that would be to save Elisha's life. Oftentimes you read in the Bible, for example, when Abraham said to the Pharaoh, this is my sister. Same thing with Isaac. You also read about Rahab in Jericho, told the people, no, they went the other way. This is misdirection for the purpose of saving a life because their lives were being threatened. And so in this case, the same. Elisha's life is being threatened, but we do have this divine protection from God, that there is the divine army of God, the horses and chariot of fire. But Elisha never invoked them. So in this case, there is the invocation of blindness, causing them not to realize this was Elisha. And whatever Elisha said is to bring them into a trap. Verse 20. And then they had come to Samaria. And then, of course, we have another word here, and then, that is missing. The reason why we have so many and thens is because this is how the Hebrew narrates. After this happened, then this happened, and then this happened. Then Elisha said this. Says, Lord, open the eyes of these men so that they may see. And then we see, so Jehovah opened their eyes and they saw, and behold, they were in the middle of Samaria. So let's explain this a little bit. God can open eyes. So it's not about blind, that you're physically blind, but you are blind because you can't understand what you see. So that is a sense of confusion and an inability to understand what they are seeing. And this is in this dimension, by the way, it's not looking at the divine dimension. This dimension, their eyes were open again. And so they may see exactly what was the real thing. So the blindness is actually to cover up and hide from their minds what they are looking. And then opening their eyes is to lift up like something that is shading their eyes. They can't really tell who Elisha was and where they were. And suddenly they saw that they were in the middle of Samaria. Too late. They were already surrounded by the king of Israel. Verse 21. And then the king of Israel, when he saw them, said to Elisha, and so we read these words, my father, shall I kill them? Shall I kill them? Now, these words are interesting that we should say, my father, to say that Elisha is older than the king of Israel. And then he asks, this is about permission, right? This is about permission. Why is he asking for permission? After all, he is a king. And the reason why he asked for permission is because now he realized that all the ambushes that he avoided was due to Elisha, the man of God. He never had a good relationship with Elisha. And now Elisha brings the entire army of horses or horsemen and the chariot to Samaria. And so the king of Israel has surrounded, and we can say that he has captured them. And so he asks for permission to slay them. And so this word kill, it is to strike, to kill. So this word kill literally means to strike them. And it literally means strike to kill. Can I kill them, my father? Right? Now, when it says my father, though we use the word father in this case, is really recognizing Elisha as, I guess, somebody who is more authoritative than the king. And hence he asks for permission. We carry on in verse 22. And then Elisha answered, you shall not strike them. And then he says, you shall not strike them. He says, do you strike those whom you have taken captive with your sword and bow? Now, these are very serious words. When you have prisoners of war, they are also human lives, and you are not to kill prisoners of war. So this is what you mean. You shall not strike to kill them. Would you strike to kill those whom you have taken captive when it was you who have captured them? Now, in this case, it was God who had captured them, right? You can think about it. God blinded their senses. They couldn't tell where they were. And suddenly, when they were aware of it, they were already captured by the king of Israel. The suggestion is this: set bread and water before them so that they may eat and drink and go to their master. What does that mean? It means feed them and set them free. Now, this is a very interesting expression because from the king of Israel's viewpoint, what he wants to do was to kill them all. And instead, the suggestion is to feed them, set bread and water before them, let them eat and drink, and go back to their master. It is totally the opposite of what the king of Israel had wanted. But this is what the man of God says, and he represents God. The king of Israel at this point in time realizes that there is a God. The Elohim of Israel, through the man of Elohim, the king of Israel cannot ignore, because what is before his eyes is an impossibility. Verse 23, and so he listened, and then he provided a large feast for them. Now, this idea of feast is about the preparation of something that is a great event. Now, a large feast is a, a, a great provision of food. And so you can call it feast, but it is really to go and get a lot of food. And not really a feast in our modern sense, because it is not about celebration, right? It is not about celebration. So this word is not really feast of a celebration. And it goes on, and then when they had eaten and then they had drunk all the wine, then we have another word here, and then he sent them away and they went to their master. So, and then they went to their master. The finality was this: the marauding bands of Arameans did not come again into the land of Israel. So, what really did happen is this is respect to Israel. Because of whatever happened, they were well taken care of, well respected, their lives were spared, they were given food, and then they were sent on their way, and that gives them a sense of mutual respect. One of the things that the king of Israel had to understand is you do not kill your captives. They are also made in the image of God, and you cannot simply take an innocent life. In fact, if they are prisoners, they are in your power. And so you have the power to lock them up, but you do not have the power to kill them because they are no longer in a situation of war. Verse 24. It begins with this word, noun, and that would be and then. We read in verse 23 that the marauding bands to come to ambush Israel stopped taking place because they had a mutual respect with the king of Israel. But after a period of time, and we don't know how long this period is, but it's long enough that they have forgotten what had happened. The words are like this: it came about after this, and then Ben Hadad, the king of Aram, gathered all his army and then went up and then besieged Samaria. Now, understand this idea of besiege Samaria. We use the word besiege. The word besiege means to confine, it also means to bind, it means to cram up. And so, in a war, if this was Samaria, then the king of Aram would be placing his army all around. And that's why we talk about besieging. The idea here is to confine it so that you can't come out and it's tight. That would be the understanding of this particular word. Verse 25. This and then there was a severe famine in Samaria. Now, this is something we have to just deal with first. First of all, the period of time that this is taking place after this is a time of severe famine. And in verse 24 onwards, this period is a period of, I guess you can say that this was a long 7-year famine. Now, many commentators would suggest that this is also in the book of Joel. That would be the same background in the book of Joel. But we will not go there. We will just continue from here. And behold, they kept besieging it until a donkey's head was sold for 80 shekels of silver, and a fourth of a calf of a dove's dung for 5 shekels of silver. Now, dove's dung literally means these are the dry dung for kindling fire. And everything is being sold. Just know that all these 80 silver, 5 pieces of silver, literally means when things were in normal times, they were very cheap. And now they are very expensive. And so this is the context. Things are very, very expensive. Now, why? Because they are inside the siege. Understand a little bit of economics. there is a sense of demand and a sense of supply, and both are related. When demand goes up and supply goes down, the price goes up. In a situation of a siege where the king of Aram is placing a noose around Samaria, then there is no increase of supply, just continually decreasing, but the demand is very constant. And so the price is driven up. Verse 26. And then, as the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, a woman cried out to him, saying, herein lies the idea of the concepts of a siege. When the siege comes to a point where there's no more food, we read in the Bible that the people even tries to eat their own babies. And this is an example of that. Verse 26. Help my lord the king. Verse 27. And then he said, after the woman spoke. So it says, if Jehovah does not help you, then how am I to help you? Now, he does recognize one thing, that there is a God above. If Jehovah, the God of Israel, does not help you, from where am I to help you? From the threshing floor or from the wine press, both of which is no more. Now, that is the situation that's there. Now, I think one of the things that King Jehoram did not understand is this. When will Jehovah help? When the king understands the Torah, when there is a famine, when there is no rain, when there is problems, they can actually turn to God for help. And as they turn to God for help, they should ask themselves, is there a national repentance that needs to take place? We do not see this from King Jehoram because he doesn't have that kind of an understanding, nor that kind of an enlightenment with regards to the Torah. So in verse 28, and then the king said to her, what is on your mind? And she said, this woman said to me, give your son so that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow. Verse 29. And so we cooked my son and then ate him. This idea of cook my son is also an idea of boiled. Now, these are all very graphic and gruesome words. It is to convey that in this particular time, it is about to come to an end. Either they die in the hands of the king of Aram, or they try to survive. And so cooking their sons. Now, what is important is cooking sons is an idea of desperation. In an Eastern mind, the sons are the progeny of the next generation. If you eat your son or if your son dies, you don't have anyone to carry the lineage. In an Eastern culture, losing a son is terrible. Hence, in Exodus, the loss of the firstborn is terrible. Now, in an Eastern culture, when you lose a son, you really don't have anyone to carry on your name, at least in the Asian culture. But in the Hebrew culture, there won't be a lineage continuity. And I said to her on the next day, give me your son so that we may eat him. But she has hidden her son. Now, these are gruesome words. These are very scary descriptions. When it says here that she has hidden her son, it is not to say that she is trying to protect her son. It is to imply that she wants to eat him alone and not share. That is what the text is suggesting. The description here is very troubling. How can a mother eat or cook or boil up the son? But these are times of desperation. Things are very, very expensive. There's nothing to be bought, even if you had money. And the only way out is under the sword of the kingdom of Aram. And so this is what the Bible talks about, that when it comes in the days in the future, even when the uh, Assyrians and then the Babylonians, these things will repeat itself. Now, in this particular case, it's just the king of Aram, and they are already facing such gruesome consequences. Can you imagine that when the Assyrians came later on, and then the Babylonians came later on, these were exactly the things that will continue to happen. Now, when we read things like that, we tend to gloss over it. But this is trying to depict the, the gruesomeness of a siege. Verse 30. And then when the king heard the woman's words, he tore his clothes. Remember the expression that he tore his clothes, which he did earlier before. Tearing of clothes is a sign of indignation. You do it for mourning, and he has done it for anger. He has torn his clothes because he was very angry. But typically, people do that in mourning. When you read the book of Jonah, the king of Nineveh did that. And he then put on sackcloth of repentance. And so, what we do read in verse 30 is very similar to the king of Nineveh. In verse 30, it continues, and he was passing by on the wall, and the people looked. Now, in this case, he was looking up. And behold, he had sackcloth underneath on his body. What does that mean? It means that as he tore his clothes, so the sackcloth was seen through the tear of his clothes. Verse 31. And then he said, may God do to me, and more so, if the head of Elisha, the son of Shaphat, remains on him today. So now we see, as we move towards the end of this chapter, the king of Israel, instead of mourning and repenting, he was showing remorse of not killing Elisha earlier. He was remorseful because he allowed Elisha to say, feed the man and send him home. He could have ended it all, and then the siege would not happen. That is what he meant by tearing his clothes. And this sackcloth could be seen as a means of regret having not killed all the horsemen and the chariots of the king of Aram earlier on. And so take off the head of Elisha. Why? He wants to cut off Elisha's head so that he cannot beg for mercy. Right? So this is the picture that we are left with. Verse 32. And then Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. This really tells us that Elisha is in touch with the people, And in this case, the people are represented by elders. So understand, in the old days, the people had leaders. So every clan, every family would vote someone from the clan, and the clan would vote somebody to represent the tribe. And so these were the elders, and they don't vote young people. They vote old people because they respect old people who would have had the experience of going through life. So this is very much an Eastern way of organization. And then we find that uh, he sent a man from his presence. And then, before the messenger came to him, he said to the elders. So now we need to just follow a little bit. He sent would be the king, came to him would be Elisha. And so Elisha said to the elders, "Do you see how this son of a murderer has sent a man to cut off my head?" Now, this is quite interesting. The son of a murderer literally tells us that he is the son of Ahav. And he knows that he's coming to cut off my head. So we do see that while Elisha is able to hear what the king of Aram says in his chambers, meaning in the secret places, and all the ambushes were thwarted. Here, Elisha can also hear what the king of Israel is saying. And way before the messenger arrived, he already knew. And so he could tell the elders, "Look, when the messenger comes, shut the door and hold the door shut against him. Is the sound of his master's feet, not behind him or following him." I think following him is a better way of saying, right? Following him. Meaning, the messenger comes to the door. This is the messenger. And so he faces the door. And then you get the king coming behind. And that is what it means by verse 32. Verse 33 it says, "While he was still talking to them," that's Elisha, "behold, the messenger came down to him, and he said, 'Behold, this evil is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer?'" Now, we need to come to terms that this evil is from the Lord. He said would be the king of Israel. This evil is the siege, and it is also the eating of children. And so the king's conclusion is very strange. He has seen what the God of Israel can do. He realizes that he is the king of Israel, yet he disregards the God of Israel. He also disregards the man of Elohim, Elisha, who has time and time again helped him and protected him. He had no relationship with Elisha, and even at a time like this, he blames Elisha for all that has happened. And his conclusion is this: "Why should I wait for Jehovah to save? There is no reason, right? No reason to wait." to wait for Jehovah for salvation. And so he would do this, take everything into his own hands. There is nothing he can hope. I think we can talk about it this way, that there is nothing to hope. The idea of wait in this case is to wait for something to happen. And that is equivalent to our translation of hoping. Meaning when you are waiting for something to happen, that it would happen. So when you hope for the Lord to do something, he thinks that there is no reason to wait any longer because this is coming from God. And this is coming from God. So to take the action, he takes action on the man of God. And with this, we come to the end of our session today.